We've got this tunnel vision for some reason, and we very aggressively defend what we do without thinking further as to what the consequences of our actions are in the environment. Woolly neck storks, they go to the estates and everyone feeds them cheese and Viennas and polony. They then go back to the nest and feed the chick this stuff that they've been eaten, which is not even good for human consumption, never mind wildlife. And we have chicks that are not growing up healthy, they've got metabolic bone disease and all sorts of complications, and they're not reaching adulthood, thanks to human beings, thanks to our kindness as we see it.
Living in a place like KZN means sharing our environment with extraordinary wildlife. From birds of prey to wildcats and small mammals, we are incredibly fortunate to live alongside species that many parts of the world only see in documentaries. But when wildlife and human life overlap, things can become complicated. A chicken coop is raided, a pet is injured, and an owl is found poisoned. And suddenly the conversations become emotional. Behind many of these incidents is an organization quietly doing the difficult work of wildlife rescue and rehabilitation. Today I'm speaking with Wade, CEO of FreeMe Wildlife, an organization dedicated to rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing injured wildlife back into the wild. In this conversation, we talk about why organizations like FreeMe are needed, how they operate, and the realities of caring for wild animals in a way that prioritizes conservation rather than human connection. Welcome, Wade. Thank you very much for coming all the way from Howick.
Thank you for having us. It's wonderful. Yeah, nice to meet you all, and look forward to the interview.
Very excited to chat to you. So I have your colleague here as well today, and we're going to put out 2 podcasts just for my listeners so that they know to wait for it. But today I wanted to talk to you about FreeMe. You are the CEO of FreeMe. Very prestigious title there.
Well, yeah, I've come into FreeMe 2016 was when I joined the organization. And as the CEO, and I've been there since it's now 11 years. So it's been a hell of an exciting journey.
Wow.
And we've had a lot of fun along the way. Lots of challenges, of course.
I can imagine.
And being a non-profit, it's the first non-profit I've ever run. So it was an interesting, what happened was FreeMe Wildlife was actually shut down in 2015. And as with many of these nonprofits, there were so many problems from a management perspective, money laundering, animal trafficking, all sorts of strange things going on behind the scenes where the conservation authorities eventually stepped in, NSPCA stepped in and they shut the doors. So the conservation authorities, I had a relationship prior to this with them, said that the only way they would keep the doors open or consider opening again is whether I stepped in and helped them out. So I took a hard think about it. It couldn't go any worse than where it was, so I had nothing to lose. I've never run a non-profit before, but I've got extensive knowledge in the wildlife arena, and I thought it would be quite an interesting challenge. So I jumped in the deep end and swam, and it's been an unbelievable journey. So, yeah.
Incredible. So what was your background? Tell me.
So I've been 34 years in the wildlife arena and started off with professional guiding with big game on foot and vehicles and on horseback. And I've managed and developed game farms, lodges, and also managed and developed wildlife rehab centers along the way. And my special interest is in behaviour, specifically big game, but all animals in general. That is my absolute passion. And I'm an entrepreneur at heart as well. So I love taking businesses that are failing, turning them back on their feet and setting them off again. And this kind of took everything that I'm about in one package and handed it to me. And I thought, well, okay, that's going to be a really, really fun challenge. So there wasn't anywhere further I could go with guiding. I had done all the levels you can do, and I had a lot of experience in the field. But where do you take that knowledge and now apply it? So in other words, animal behavior in the wild, how do you now go further than that? And it was interesting because wildlife rehabilitation, you need that intimacy of understanding what that animal does in the wild in order to effectively rehabilitate it. The way we do at FreeMe Wildlife, of course, it's very different to what many other rehab centers run.
Tell me how it differs.
Okay, so we are what is known as a professional science-based wildlife rehabilitation, and that is opposed to an emotional-based wildlife rehabilitation, which most people are. And the difficult part about running a science-based wildlife rehabilitation center is being neutral. So from a neutral standpoint, you look at cases that come in, and these admission cases, depending on what species, we cover the full spectrum: mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates. We permit it for the full spectrum. It takes a lot of research, a lot of communication and collaboration with specialists in the field. You cannot know everything. The field is just too broad. So we love communicating with other people. So people skills, really, really important. And it's one of the things we hold as a priority when we look at interviewing people for any jobs at FreeMe Wildlife is how good are your communication and people skills? Because essentially, when we often ask people this, what is FreeMe Wildlife about? Oh, well, you guys are about wildlife. No. We're all about people. And we use wildlife as the vehicle to touch people's lives. Of course, rehab centers wouldn't be necessary if it wasn't for people. So it's basically human-wildlife conflict we're dealing with all the time. And people are not out there with malicious intent when they save and try and hand-raise animals and fix them and then damage them because they don't know any better. It's just ignorance. It's not malicious intent. And what we do is we fill a gap where we provide that service for the members of the public. So we have the knowledge base, we've got the expertise, and we have the connections internationally that can help us with these cases and get wildlife back where they need to be in the wild as a wild animal. And that's the key of here. So there's no petting, taming, playing, none of that stuff. We keep wild animals wild from the start all the way through to release. And the difficult side of this is moving out of the way of the animal. In other words, not wanting to be a part of the cuddling, not wanting to, they're not humans, they don't understand that interaction. We want it more than they do. So often what we find here is people with personal issues coming on board to these organizations, never having addressed those issues, reflecting those issues onto a case, a patient, and treating themselves, thereby damaging the patient.
Wow.
That's what we're sitting with most times here. So it's very, very difficult to find the right people who are so self-aware that they actually understand. It's not about being perfect. It's about understanding that that is the issue, because that allows you then to stop yourself, step back, rethink, or move somebody else who's better suited to that case into the position to help with the rehabilitation. So that's what we're sitting with. There's a lot of egos, of course, as in any field there is. So we don't entertain any animal activism. We're not interested in it. We're interested in delivering a professional service to the communities of KwaZulu-Natal whom we serve. So as a nonprofit, I strongly believe that you're a value-adding service. You're not a drain on society. You have to add value. And because you add value, people support and keep your doors open. You don't use emotional blackmail to get funding in to keep your doors open. That's the opposite. And that is a drain on society. And there are so many nonprofits. Anyone can open up a nonprofit these days. But you have this thing called donor fatigue.
Yes.
No surprise when you got thousands of these nonprofits knocking on everybody's doors and phoning them and begging for money. That is not value adding. So you'll very seldom see us ask for funding, not on any of our social media posts, nowhere. We believe add value first, and because people feel that value, they want to exchange by keeping your doors open, whether it's material donations, funding, just general support, speaking well about us, using us as a service. That's what we're there for. We are there to serve.
So I want to ask you quite a controversial question. So we see it obviously in the small animal space where there may be an organization that, as you say, will put an appeal out for one particular case. There's obviously one that's touched their heart, and I understand how it happens because, we feel the same when we come across those special cases, and we feel that they are deserving. But from a resource perspective, financially, it's very draining. And as you say, there is a limited amount of support that you can anticipate. And say, I'm going to use an example, silly example, this animal needs a plate. And it's a very expensive procedure. And they put a big appeal out there and money's raised and the animal is saved. What is your feeling about that versus raising funds for that whole herd health perspective or managing through vaccinations and the bigger picture and the longevity of NPOs?
Well, I think the first question, and I was talking specifically in the arena of wildlife rehabilitation now, the first question one has to ask yourself when you get a case in, what is the conservation value in saving this specific case? And the answer to that gives you your answer. So if it's, let's give you an example, wattled crane. They're an endangered species currently. They were critically endangered. They've just been uplisted to endangered. Is it worth putting every effort into saving a wattled crane in South Africa? Well, there's just over 300 adults left in the wild. They are endangered birds. I would think, yes, let's put every effort we can. And here's the interesting thing. I'm a strong believer in nature rewards courage. And how nature rewards courage, nature removes obstacles. So when you put the word out there and you put the energy out there and you have a case that you really want to work towards solving, everything falls in place. And it works. The danger here with nonprofits is starting a nonprofit with no funding base, because straight away you're a drain on society. Okay, so how on earth did you think you were going to grow this thing? It takes a very special kind of person to start from below ground zero or zero and build a nonprofit up with no resources. That's not an easy thing to do. But when people see the value you add to communities, to society, they want to back the winning horse. They want to climb on board. They want to contribute. We've got vets from around the world that will help us in the blink of an eye. San Diego Zoo we work closely with. We work with Dr. Neil Forbes in the UK. He's the world's leading orthopedic surgeon on birds of prey. So Australia, there's so many people who want to come on board and help you because you're authentic. There's integrity behind what you're doing. You're not trying to twist things around in order to make money from it. You're here to do a specific purpose, and it's to serve people and the wildlife in your care. Yes, you've got to make the right call, and it's a very difficult decision to make sometimes, which is why we always involve more than 3 specialists or high-up management level staff, including some of our vets, when we do decisions on euthanasia. And we have a very strong euthanasia policy. FreeMe Wildlife will not send an animal to captivity. So if we rehab a wild animal, it goes back to the wild. If it's a specialized case, so you're dealing with an endangered or a critically endangered species like a wattle crane, and it cannot be returned to the wild, I will personally go to a breeding facility. I will inspect, interview, look, and we look at the bird. We look at a certain criteria. Would the bird actually cope in captivity? Because not every personality, yes, animals have personalities. Not every personality is suited to captivity. Remember, captivity is a human idea. Wildlife don't understand this. So when we send an animal to captivity, we've done the research on the animal and on the facility, and we know that we're happy with that decision. We've sent 3 birds to captive facilities for breeding over the last 11 years. Those are the only 3 we've sent to captivity. If it cannot go back to the wild, it is a euthanasia case. And the reason we do that is we often get animals that have been hoarded that cannot be returned to the wild. They what we call these ambassador animals. How many ambassador animals does an organization really need? And when you say ambassador animal, what's the purpose behind it? Is it to educate like everybody claims, or is it to keep yourself viable and to raise funding? There's a very, very big difference between the two, and we are totally against the exploitation of wildlife and people and volunteers to make money, in the claim that you need to keep your doors open. FreeMe Wildlife runs none of those things. We're a non-profit organization, and the question is, how are we doing it if we're not following the standard protocols that everybody else does? And the purpose I set out when I came in 2016 was to set 2 examples. A, how to do wildlife rehabilitation professionally, science-based, and correctly, the real way we believe it should be done, and how to run a non-profit the correct way, a value-adding service to the members of the society rather than a drain on society. If we can set an example in both arenas, no one has an excuse not to do the same. And I believe we've achieved that.
You look at me, I look at you, I see the love in your eyes. I'm lost in
Health you can see, love you can feel. Ultrapet, the science of love.
So So talk to me a little bit more about the science-based aspect, because you have, you've alluded to the fact that you've got a great team behind you, but there's something very interesting about the science-based aspect that you mentioned before to me that I want you to share with my listeners.
Well, there's three things you've got to take into account when you do science-based wildlife rehabilitation. The three things are physiology, and unfortunately, most rehab centers get stuck at that point. That's what they focus on. But there are three components to rehab here. It's physiology, ethology, psychology. Those are the three things. So what is physiology? Well, how does the animal work? What does the body do? How does it respond to injury, healing, etc., etc.? Ethology. How does that animal behave in a natural environment in the wild with its own species and also with the species that share the same environment? What are the behaviors that are out there? And what's the natural environment it occurs in? And then, of course, the psychology, the stress, the depression an animal goes into when it's outside of its natural environment, when it's been handled, when it's in pain, when it's sitting in a clinic with white walls, in a strange environment, hearing strange noises, smelling strange sounds, and it's got the upright human form, which all wildlife they fear. What is the psychology of the animal? So those are your three steps. You've got to take all three of those components into account when you're doing professional science-based wildlife rehabilitation. Otherwise, you are not doing rehabilitation. You are not serving the purposes of that animal, and you're not getting them back as a whole unit back into the wild. So what we use as, let's call it a guideline, is two words: beauty and innocence. So we always revert back to this. And it's not just beauty and innocence, it is the understanding of what beauty and innocence means in the context of wildlife and wildlife rehabilitation. So when we look at beauty, what are we looking at? When we look at an animal, we're looking at three things: its proportion, its clarity, and its integrity of the species. When we look at innocence, what are we looking for? We are looking for the true expression of nature. If we are not getting that true expression of nature throughout the rehabilitation process, we're missing the mark. And we really, really need to intimately understand the subject we're dealing with, that species we're dealing with. So when they come in, research is done. Research, and we talk to a lot of specialists in the field who are more, who have more knowledge on those species than we do. And we put a whole package together and we work out a rehabilitation plan and protocol for that species from time it comes in to post-release even. So there is a lot of work that gets done behind the scenes, and that is why we call it science-based wildlife rehabilitation, not emotional-based, where, shame, he's feeling sore today, let's give him some muti, he's looking lonely, let's cuddle him, etc., etc., etc. That just does not work, because that's serving the person's purpose and not the animal's purpose.
The selfie with the
selfie, that's it.
So a lot of the stuff, from my understanding, is that you're anticipating this, and this has obviously come from some learnings. What are some of the mistakes that you've seen happen when you don't, you, like you say, you're dealing with the physiology, you're getting that animal better? Are there any failures that you've personally experienced, maybe in the early days or with other organizations, that have then proved that an animal cannot be released, for example?
One of the mistakes so again, going back to petting, taming, playing with, that kind of thing, it's much harder not to do that than to do that, because human nature just wants to step in and interfere with things, and we think we know better. So when we go into things like habituating, imprinting animals and taming animals, imprinting them on human beings, you have a problem coming in with it identifying with its own species. Now, this is really important when it comes to male animals, and especially things like antelope, which have horns. So what happens is they imprint on a human, they don't understand what they are, the hormones kick in when they become sexually mature, they're confused and they don't know what to do, but they know they've got to do something, so that they defend what they believe is their territory against what they believe is the threat, which is now a man walking past. So they can kill people, There's some horrific injuries we've seen, heard about, and it happens continually where people start hand raising, especially male animals. And then, of course, the question you always have to ask, as I mentioned earlier, is what's the conservation value in what you've done? So what's the conservation value in imprinting an animal, habituating to a human? There is zero conservation value to that whatsoever. So what have you done with the public funding that you were gifted? That's the question you've got to ask. Because you now have a responsibility as a non-profit to use the funding that you are gifted from the members of the public who keep your doors open, to use it to the best of your ability professionally in the field that you've been mandated to do. And in this case, professional science-based wildlife rehabilitation. It's not an entertainment zoo for the person who owns or runs it. Okay, this is a service professionally that is paid for and funded by members of the public. So if a member of the public was a fly on the wall in our office listening to our conversations, they need to be proud of where we're putting their funding.
And there's public responsibility, as you say,
Absolutely.
when they release and no one's monitoring that situation.
Correct.
So what are the kind of cases that you're dealing with? I know that you have a particular interest in cats, you mentioned.
Yeah.
So what are the sort of things you're coming across? There's obviously a lot of conflict out there.
There's a lot of human-wildlife conflict, and it's growing. You know, populations are growing, so-called wildlife estates, but not only wildlife estates, housing estates are growing, roads are growing, traffic is growing, everything's growing, and wildlife habitat is shrinking every single day. It's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So conflict is inevitable. And I mean, we can point fingers and blame things. You know, we have dog hunting increasing. We have snaring increasing. But we have pet conflict increasing as people going on a hike. They have the dog, they take it off the leash, it tackles a jackal. It tackles a little antelope, people going on hikes, walking past a baby antelope that mom has left under a tuft of grass. Oh no, let's rescue it. It's been abandoned. It's not understanding wildlife. So we have a lot of these things coming in. And again, it's about people's skills. So people are ignorant. They often don't have malicious intent. And it's about educating through engagement. So it's not just education. Everyone throws that word around. And I believe when we talk about educating people, you're talking down at people. It doesn't work. So we use the word engagement rather. Engagement leads to involvement. By default, leads to education. And that's how you get to the education side. So it's important to explain to people what they've done wrong in a nice way so you don't degrade the person. You want to build them up. And people are fascinated when you can explain to them what's happened here and why. African wildcats, that's a nice one. They come into people's houses, especially the big males. You've got a conflict with territories now with domestic and feral cats. So I've got my pet kitty at home. It's a little male. And the next thing, this big thug comes into the house of an African wildcat and starts beating my poor little kitty up. And then it starts urinating all over the walls in my house. And I don't know what on earth is going on here. Trap it, get rid of it. This thing is a terrible thing. Well, no, he's just protecting his territory. So one big male African wildcat will cover about 4 female African wildcats' territories, and that's his territory. And now we bring domestic kitty into this territory. Well, this is fair game, guys. I've got to either beat this guy up to show him who's boss here and drive him out of my territory. But hey, no, human, this is your house. Remember, wildlife don't understand boundaries, fences, walls. They have absolutely no idea what those are. So, you know, we often get the phone call up, your cat has beaten our cat up. Your monkey is in my garden eating the fruit. Well, it's not ours. It's everybody's. This is belonging to our future generations, and we need to look after this, and we need to understand it. And I think one of our biggest problems with education today is we've excluded wildlife, which is part of our tourism, the 3rd biggest income bringer in South Africa. Why is it not in our education systems in school? Why are we not teaching our kids all these things? That's called empowerment. We're taking it away from them. You know, and most of our adults we're dealing with today, adult human beings, just don't have a knowledge base on wildlife. There's such a massive disconnect with nature, but we live with it in our own yards and houses.
And we're so privileged to have that.
Absolutely.
I mean, we live in an area where
yes.
I think
we don't all
there's an
believe
appreciation.
That, the moment we see a bug, we run out with a doom. You know, and then we want to save the rose bushes because the little dyke is feeding on the petals, which are so great for food. So there's all these conflicts that come in, you know, and then you spray for all the insects on your flowers, and then you put the bird feeder up. You know, now you have a bird feeder, so all your seed eaters come. But where the insect eaters, you have this massive imbalance. And you're feeding through winter months when there shouldn't be food, which eliminates the weaker. So now you have a strong population of seed eaters, which outcompete your insect eaters for nesting sites. And it's just a knock-on effect. So people just have lost understanding and connection with nature across many, many different fields.
But
so
why is this not taught in schools?
that is the question. Because it's fascinating. I mean, that's how we got into this field of work in the first place. I mean, as a kid, we would hand raise a dove that fell out of the nest. I had a little polecat I hand raised and released. All sorts of little things when you're small. And it's one of the things FreeMe Wildlife also believes in. When people phone in, we've had 3 little girls, farm girls, over the years, and they've got little grey darker lambs, and they've said, we really want to hand raise this. We said, well, fine, let's help you. So you understand how to do it correctly. You don't imprint the little animal, and all 3 of them have actually released their dikers into the wild beautifully without any complications. So it's just a lack of knowledge, and I think we need to nurture youngsters that come in and want to be a part of nature in some way, whether it's hand raising a dove, or whatever it may be. I think that's where we're falling flat. Don't touch wildlife, it's dirty, don't do this, don't do that. Quickly get the doom can, there's a spider sort of thing. That's just not the way to do it.
I mean, I've been quite surprised, obviously, my listeners are very aware. I talk about my son quite a bit. But, obviously having a mother as a vet, we enjoy wildlife, we enjoy the garden, we enjoy our pets and so on. So he'll come across a frog and he'll pick up a frog, and he's now doing that at school. So he'll be like, trying to, but the absolute horror from the children around him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm surprised by that, because I always thought that that's sort of how boys are raised, frogs and insects and saving things in the pool.
Yeah.
But I'm quite surprised by the response. And
I think the sad thing here is one of the major causes of the disconnect is these wonderful things called cell phones. So it pulls you completely out of your surroundings, and you get sucked into social media, whatever it may be, and you're living in a world that is not right where you are. So you miss the frog and the insect, and boys aren't boys anymore.
But do you think that also comes from a lot of fear? Particularly we talk in our area about snakes and people being really bad at identifying them. And so then generally the whole snake category becomes one of fear. So rather than fascination of like, oh, this one's beautiful, let's release it, there is, as we know, there are a lot of people who would rather kill that snake.
Absolutely.
And so they're same with spiders. And I'm going to have the opportunity to talk to your colleague Taming later about the raptors. But, there's a lot of fear around some of the wildlife out there. Do you think that is part of it?
Absolutely. And the fear comes from the unknown. So the question then is, why aren't we curious? Why aren't we asking questions? What is that? Is that actually dangerous? Let's learn a little bit more about that. And that's one of the things, again, we look at FreeMe Wildlife when we bring people onto our team, is the curiosity factor. How big is your curiosity factor? Because wildlife rehabilitation is all about curiosity. If you don't have it and you don't keep asking questions, you don't grow. You can never know everything. And we can always better the processes and protocols we use through rehabilitation. And the only way you get there is to ask questions, hard truths. You've got to be hard on those questions, and you've got to be willing to accept the answers, because if there's ego in the way, it damages. So you've got to learn to be humble as well.
I mean, we talk about cell phones, and I mean, I know everyone's like, me included, we're trying to get our kids off cell phones, but there is a lot of benefit to even AI capabilities now. There are phenomenal apps that allow you to scan an image of an animal and it identifies it through AI capabilities. And for me, that's a win, because in that moment you can very quickly say, this is not dangerous, or let's learn more about it. Versus that old school, like I must remember what that looked like so that I can go to the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we use it as well. I mean, a lot of our research gets done online too, using cell phones, etc. But you've also got to be wise as to what information you accept from your internet providers and things, because not all of it is necessarily true. So there is that side of it as well. But it's an incredibly powerful tool. So if it's used in the right hands for the right reasons, I think it can take you really, really far and do a lot of good. But I don't think it is.
No. So let's talk about some of the cases that you deal with. What are the ones that are just every day?
Right, so everything we deal with mostly is human-wildlife conflict. And in some way, it's affecting people's lives. And one of the classic cases is the variety of cats we get in. So it's your smaller carnivores, indigenous ones, which are your Caracals, your Servals, and your African wildcats in particular. And one of the common sort of misconceptions we get in is it's a poultry thief. And we get that from a lot of the farms in the areas. This guy's been catching my poultry, he's killed my ducks, he's killed my chickens, he must go. So they set up a trap, a sort of a crude cage trap. They bait it with a live chicken or meat, and they catch the cat. We've got him, FreeMe Wildlife, come and fetch your cat. So we do. But we also engage with the person. And the question is, right, so how are you going to prevent this from happening again? Because you know that this is going to happen again. Well, no, we've caught the culprit. No, you haven't caught the culprit. You've just caught a cat. You don't know if it's a culprit. He's an opportunist. He walked past the trap cage. There was a chicken. Why would he not take that opportunity? If you catch him inside your poultry pen, different story, then yes, he's the culprit. But why is he inside your poultry pen if you haven't built it correctly? So the next one's going to get in as well. So are you going to fix your poultry pen up? So we often find people don't want to put that effort in. It's easier just to remove the problem or the perceived problem. And what happens when you remove the perceived problem is you create a vacuum. So you take a serval out of the system, you create a vacuum, a new serval moves in. And it's just a question of time before he sees the same opportunities. And he takes a chance. I mean, we've had one farm up in the Midlands there give us 3 Caracals and 3 Servals all catching the same poultry. And they've all been relocated. And the point you get to is, well, you can't keep doing this because it's not fair on the wildlife. If you don't cover the trap cage properly, the cat inside panics, it rips its claws out, it damages its face, smashing it against the bars, trying to get out, snaps its canine teeth off. And there's all sorts of complications that come with that. But if it's an adult animal and you want it relocated, it's at a serious disadvantage. You're going to release it in an area that's unknown to the animal. If you don't have a period of time between when you capture the cat and you relocate it, it's probably going to end up just going back home again, especially when you deal with things like leopards, jackals, caracals, servals. They will go home.
Often being hit in the road on the way home.
There's all sorts of things that come. They get snared on the fences on the way home, hit by vehicles, as you say, shot by other farmers because now we've got problem animals coming through and we go out at night and we shoot things. So yeah, there's so many challenges to these animals, apart from now finding food in a new area and surviving the adult, mature males who hold territory there now again, or females, whatever it may be. There's so many complications that come with this that people don't understand. It's easy just to trap something and then send it off to FreeMe Wildlife, please solve our problem. You've now created a new problem on that same farm again by creating that vacuum. You're allowing other predators into that space, and it could lead to all sorts of complications, if not exactly the same problem in the future again.
So other than trapping, I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that there's a lot of discussion about, how do we manage this? Even on the chicken groups, I see it. Poisoning, like you say, snares and trapping, shooting them.
Yep. Yeah. Terrible.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. And not all of it's done cleanly. You put poisons out, what has that affected? The animal might eat over there. They might be walking who knows where. Then you've got scavengers that eat on that carcass. And so it goes on and on and on. Rodenticide poisonings are a classic example. And Tammy can cover a little bit more of that when it comes down to the owls and the birds that feed on that. But it affects genets. It affects all sorts of things. And it's shooting at night is great. What happens when you wound the animal and it gets away? You shoot a jackal and you shoot it with a lead bullet. Where's that lead bullet go? You've got lead toxicity. You've got lead poisoning in the environment. Your vultures are coming in. We're getting tons of them coming in with lead poisoning. And they're picking it up from carcasses, ammunition, lead ammunition. So there's so many things here that we are not seeing the further effects of what we're doing here. We're only looking at right where we are now. We've got this tunnel vision for some reason, and we very aggressively defend what we do without thinking further as to what the consequences of our actions are in the environment. And not just in the environment, it's to your neighbors' pets, poultry, stock, it doesn't matter, kids, children, adults, staff, waterways. Where does that water carry this? I mean, rodenticides are now being found in fish. It's crazy. So this stuff leaches into the environment, whatever you're using. Yeah.
So what do they do? What are the solutions? Because, I hear what you're saying, that a lot of people can only live with the damage that's been done to, say, this is a small production,
Right.
or, it's a pet chicken.
Yeah.
This is obviously very sensitive and and a very emotive topic.
Absolutely.
So how do you approach that conversation?
And it's one of the things we believe in FreeMe Wildlife. You have to offer a solution. We can't just talk about the problems. You need to offer a solution. Otherwise, what's the point of anything? So when we engage with people who have got poultry, the first question is, let's have a look at your enclosures, guys. Are you willing to invest the money to fix these enclosures? What have your stock losses been? What have your poultry losses been? What have they amounted to? If you had invested that money in fixing the enclosure properly, would this actually have saved you the money in the long run? And we often find the case is. It would have saved you. So I think building proper enclosures, understanding what you're sharing your environment with, because that's where the big problem comes in. Nobody actually knows what these species are even called. So we get the most amazing names coming in about the animal, and we're like, what on earth is that? Until you see the photo. Okay, we're dealing with X. So, servals are leopards and civets and genets and all sorts of weird things, cheetahs. Servals are rodent specialists. In hard times and when they're opportunistic and there's an opportunity that present themselves, they will take a chicken. But that's not their major diet. They're 90% rodents. That's their diet. That's what they specialize in. So what we would like people to do is understand who you share your environment with, especially when you're bringing in sheep, lambs, cattle, poultry, ducks, whatever it might be. Understand who you share the environment with and what the threats are and how can you overcome those, because they can be overcome quite easily when you start off right. Understand that there's a crowned eagle nest down the road. The youngsters hatch every single year. They will be looking for food that's easy. Mm-hmm. They don't know a chicken belongs to a person. Mm-hmm. They don't know the little pet chihuahua running around the lawn belongs to a person. It's fair game. Yeah. We're part of these environments, and what we often forget as human beings is we are a part of the ecosystem, whether we like it or not. We are not separate from it. We're part of nature. So let's understand it. Let's work with it and understand how it works. And that's how you solve the conflict, through the understanding.
But as a chicken owner, it's very small backyard chicken.
Yeah.
We understand as soon as you're feeding chickens, there are going to be rodents.
Correct.
And that is one of the pet peeves of keeping chickens.
Yeah.
So having a solution to that is of benefit. So it's not always that it's a problem. As long as you, as you say, you are managing your enclosures, you are putting the correct things in place, it's actually a benefit.
Yeah, and something to bear in mind, the moment you provide a food source, so chickens, yes, they're a food source, but chicken feed is a food source which attracts rodents, which is a food source. So now you have snakes following, you have the genets following, you have little striped weasel, which are rodent specialists, you have servals following. Now we want to get rid of the snakes, but you've got a pond in your yard. You've got a bird feeder. The bird feeder feeds the monkeys, it feeds the rodents. They come in at night. So your rubbish bin, what is your protocols for keeping the rubbish clean on the estate, on the farm, that attracts rodents. So you've got all these attractants, but nobody goes to the source to solve the problem. We all try and stick an elastoplast on what we're seeing, which are the symptoms. So it's always wisest to go straight to the source, be really honest with yourself, solve it right there, and you can solve yourself so many headaches in the future if you do it that way. And we're happy to help people with advice on things like that. That's what we do.
So what do people do when they come across wildlife? Let's say, I'm going to use an example and we can obviously expand on it, but let's say a little bird that they've found on the floor. They're often going, they come into the practice and they go like, I found this little, what is the correct sort of approach to these sort of situations? Because I think everybody has, as you mentioned, great intent and really are trying to help, but they don't understand necessarily the harm they could be doing.
They don't. And that little bird that you just mentioned now is a classic case, especially now in sort of summer where we have breeding season and the little guys are in nests and they start fledging, they start flying. They can't fly straight away, so they jump out of the nest and they clamber in the branches and they run around on the ground, and everyone runs and picks these little fledglings up and brings them into the rehab centers or the vets, and they say, we found the guy can't fly. Well, It takes them about 5 days, 1 to 2 weeks to build up flight fit muscles in order to fly. And in the meantime, mom and dad are still feeding them on the ground and looking after them. Yes, they're fair game to genets, etc. Unfortunately, domestic cats feature in that as well, and so do dogs. But that's part of the ecosystem. Only 30% of animals that are born in the wild survive to adulthood. The rest are part of the food chain. So it's always wisest to let be. Unless it is a direct human conflict where you see your cat is now going to eat that bird and we can't do anything about it, right, then you can bring that animal in. But what we would advise, put your cat away just for a few days until that little bird can fly, and then off he goes. So it's always best to work with nature, not against nature. And I think the best thing to do is when you find an animal and you don't know what to do, give us a call. We'll advise you. We'll walk you through the steps. We'll ask you a few questions, and we'll help educate you and engage you, and probably nothing needs to be done with that animal at all.
What about injured wildlife?
Right, so injured wildlife, particularly human-wildlife conflict injuries, we deal with. That's one of the things we specialize in. You can take it to your nearest vet. You can give us a call. We cover the whole of KwaZulu-Natal with the work we do, and we have people all over the place which can do transport for us to bring them into the centres. Or you yourself can transport them through to FreeMe Wildlife. Also no problem at all. But we'll advise you what to do depending on the injury. You can maybe send us a photograph or two, and we can say, right, well, keep him warm, keep him in a quiet room, and when you're ready, we can get the transport organised and bring him through.
So this is obviously very case dependent, but
yes.
What are some of the mistakes that you see people make, when they are dealing with injured wildlife?
Often trying to hand raise animals themselves without the correct knowledge, and the favourite with bird is the prenutro, that kind of thing. But incorrect diets lead to all sorts of complications, metabolic bone disease, which cannot be rectified later on down the line. So you end up putting those animals down and they suffer. So it's basically a loss. So pick up the phone, give us a call, or your nearest rehabilitation centre a call, and just ask advice. And then you can make an educated, informed decision on what to do with the animal you have at hand. They keep animals too long, especially injured animals. So if you have animals that have been hit by a vehicle, a broken wing, for example, broken leg with an exposed bone, that bone dries, you can do nothing to save that animal. It ends up being a euthanasia case, and it's heartbreaking for the person who saved it because they had a good intention to start with. And it's heartbreaking for us because we've got to tell the people this as well. And the sad thing is, potentially that animal could have been saved had it come in straight away. So, that's a lot of what we deal with.
So I know that this is in particular, KZN problem, but we have a lot of people who are very anti-monkeys and the troops that pass through the garden.
Controversial subject, yes.
Very controversial. What is actually happening there? How do we deal with this as a conversation that actually is going to aid the situation rather than make it an inflammatory one?
I think, again, you've got to look at this from a neutral standpoint, because it's pointless. One person has a problem with monkeys because they really love the fruit and veggies in their garden. The monkeys ruin it, or they come into the windows, and the neighbor loves the monkeys and is feeding them next door. Both have their own reasons why they're doing this, and we've got to listen to both sides. I don't think monkeys are the issue here. I think people are the issue. They're always the issue. And the challenges we see with monkeys these days is there are so many reasons, and we can point fingers at so many people as to why that is the case. The question, how do you go forward from here? Well, I think, again, the first thing, you've got to understand your subject, understand monkeys, understand how they work as a troop, as individuals. They're really cute. They are primates, which is why we relate to them, which is why we're drawn to them, which is why we want to save these little things and cuddle them and love them. And so many people do this. But understanding them in their natural environment for what they are is actually quite a pleasure. Yes, they cause havoc. Yes, they raid houses. This is all learnt behaviour from sharing habitation with human beings in cities, etc. Solve it? Well, that's a really, really difficult one, because you're not just going to solve it by wiping out that troop of monkeys. The next one, again, you create a vacuum. Next one moves in. The same people who were feeding those monkeys will continue to feed them, habituate them. They become a problem again, and so the cycle just continues. So I think the best way forward here is to understand the problem really well and work with it. Close your houses, Close your windows when you're outside. Yes, if you've got fruit and veggies in your garden, well, that's one of those sad things you're sharing, and not only with monkey, but birds, all sorts of animals that will come in and help themselves to free food. Remember, they're opportunists. They don't understand that is my orange tree. They don't understand that's my yard, don't come over the fence. That's a human concept. It's not a wildlife concept. So if we can get over that understanding and look at it from a wildlife perspective as an opportunist, and, well, if you've got a tree full of fruit, why should I not help myself? You've got to protect your things. So in other words, close them up, put them in a fence, cover them up with whatever you need to do, and that's the way to do it. But I mean, it's a terrible life to live if you're going to be bitter to the end about a monkey that's stealing your veggies and the neighbor who's feeding them. So, yeah.
And what is your feeling about people who encourage wildlife into their gardens, so have feeding stations?
I don't think it's a wise thing. I think nature has cycles that are there for a reason. You've got your winters, you've got your summers, and our winters are quite harsh, and that's when everybody wants to put food out and save and help animals. Well, that's when the weak ones are eliminated from the system. That's nature's way of doing it. Sure, there's far more humans now than there ever were, and there's lots of habitat fragmentation, so wildlife find it very challenging to find places to live and find enough food. You've got to take that into account as well, but I don't think by feeding you solving a problem. You may actually be creating a worse one. And you've also got to be very careful what you feed, because not all animals can digest sucrose, sugars, and we love putting fruits and things out for little grey duikers, and they don't digest that stuff very well. He might be eating it. It's like giving a steak with vegetables and a chocolate on a plate to a kid. Which one's he going to choose? He's going to go for the chocolate. It's not healthy. So you end up with all sorts of complications as far as the health of the animals go. We're seeing it in woolly neck storks. They go to the estates and everyone feeds them cheese and Viennas and polony. They then go back to the nest and feed the chick this stuff that they've been eating, which is not even good for human consumption, never mind wildlife. And we have chicks that are not growing up healthy. They've got metabolic bone disease and all sorts of complications, and they're not reaching adulthood, thanks to human beings, thanks to our kindness as we see it. So we just need to understand a little bit more about the animals that are in our environment, even in your backyard. And there are animals in your backyard, whether you like it or not, they move through all the time. They're not restricted by fences. So understand them, understand diets, understand seasons, and work with it. I'm not for people feeding animals at all. They're well capable of looking after themselves.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Because obviously, I know, people, it starts with the basic. You talk about feeding the wrong thing. I remember when living in the UK, feeding ducks bread.
There you go.
Yes. That it was just that everybody took the stale bread to the ducks. And now obviously that's something that's a big no-no. So, we're learning. We're learning and we're trying to do better. But
that's the way to do it. I think creating a naturally food-rich garden is the way to go. So plant trees, shrubs, plants that are environmentally friendly for wildlife. They attract birds, they attract insects. Then you have a haven. You've got what we call islands of hope. And that little island of hope, wildlife love, because they feel safe there, they can find food and shelter there, and they can breed there. Little birds, little insects, whatever it might be. And from your safe haven, from your island of hope, as they breed up, they can disperse into surrounding areas. So we need more islands of hope, compost heaps, that kind of thing. Just in a small yard can make a massive difference. Don't use insecticides. Don't use rodenticides. Look after your waste management well so you don't have a rat problem, etc., etc. It's very simple and it's all doable. This is not complicated stuff. This is just about actually taking responsibility.
I know we are running out of time, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to discuss the rabies crisis that we're having here in South Africa. But
it's the worst in the last 100 years. Can you believe
awful.
It or not? Yeah, it's crazy.
How is that impacting you? What are the cases you're seeing?
It doesn't impact us too much. We've had a few cases over the last few years. I think we've had about all mongoose cases. White-tailed and large greys are the ones we've got in with rabies, confirmed cases. We've actually had one this last week, which is a white-tailed mongoose from Underberg. So interesting, rabies is not a natural disease to South Africa. It was introduced in 1892, if my memory serves me correctly, from England, a terrier that was brought across on a ship, which had rabies, and that is the first recorded case ever in South Africa, and from there it's evolved and it's come from the north and so on. And so it's spread into wildlife, jackals and mongoose, and people often say, oh, mongoose, be careful of them, they are rabies carriers. Well, no. Any animal that contracts rabies is a rabies carrier until the point it dies, and all of them that have contracted rabies will die. That's how it works. So the fact that we have a white-tailed mongoose that's coming with rabies, it's picked it up through saliva or contact with another animal, whichever that animal might be. And yes, it can spread wherever it goes. But what is the major spread of rabies? It's dogs. Pet dogs in high concentrations, in towns, in settlements, and those especially that have not been inoculated. There is your problem. It's domesticated animals, not wildlife. Wildlife are feeling the consequences of that and our irresponsibility, again, as human beings. So that's the issue we sit with. Yes, it is a deadly disease. It's not a nice disease. And of course, all our staff are inoculated, and we're very aware of it. So when animals come in, especially small carnivores, they are all treated as if they may be a rabies case. So we're quite aware of the situation.
And I think a lot of the benefit of the fact that you're assessing behaviour means that you can detect these very quickly, because behaviourally they're not behaving either. They're
a little bit abnormal.
And one way or the other.
Yeah, the interesting thing about rabies is no case that we've had in presents exactly the same. They're just slightly different. But because the behaviour is off, we are very cautious. Straight away, there's a red flag. We've had a large grey mongoose in that ate all its food. It just pigged out on the food while it was there until it died. It even died with a day-old chick in its mouth. And that's just not rabies-like. It was confirmed a rabies case. The last little white-tailed mongoose we've had in now, this last week, didn't touch any of its food at all. Just walked in circles, and that's sort of classic insecticide poisoning type thing, neurological problems. But it just deteriorated worse and worse, and then it went through a small, short phase where if we approached the cage, it was actually quite aggressive, but could do nothing because it had no balance. So, they all present slightly differently. It depends on the individual, how fast the rabies is moving through to the brain, and the personality, again, of the animal. And you've got to have that caution. So something's off, be very careful of it. And we handle it with high caution.
And also, that public health risk, we're saying handling little birds is one thing, but, be cautious when you are coming across.
Be very, very careful of picking up a roadkill, because often your rabies cases, they attack vehicles moving past. People don't understand what's going on. They just see, the genet ran across the road and I drove over it. Well, you don't know why it did that. Jackal cases, etc. You find them wandering into your yard on the farm and they're abnormally tame. Be very, very careful of those animals. Don't go try and approach them. Don't try and handle them. Don't try and catch them. And in fact, any of your small carnivores, you should have a person knowing what they're doing when they're coming to catch those things. And just because he's a baby does not mean he doesn't have rabies.
No.
Yeah.
So what is your hope for FreeMe for the future?
I don't like the word hope.
I love the word hope. I like
making things happen.
Okay.
And I do think that FreeMe Wildlife has an immense part to play in the vision of humanity going forward, in the sense of we see ourselves as a lighthouse. We see ourselves as the light at the end of the tunnel. People don't know what they want until you show them. And we love showing people. We love setting examples, and we love showcasing the work we do. We really, really love what we do and how we do it.
And for people who want to help the organization, how can they do that? What's the best way to support you?
There's a number of ways. The best way to support us is, of course, financially. And you can find our banking details on our website, freemewildlife.org. You can join up as a custodian. That goes towards the running costs of our organization. One of the most difficult arenas to cover when you're running a nonprofit is your running costs. Of course, people don't understand. They want to donate money towards an enclosure, but it takes people to manage those and to care for the animals, etc., etc. So funding is a really good way to do it, but otherwise you can donate materials as well to new projects. We're starting up a fantastic new project up in the Zululand region near Shishlui. It's a new center, 4 times the size of the one we have now. So that's going to be amazing, an amazing project, and lots of work to be done there. Contact us direct, email us if you want to get involved, be it physically, be it financially, whatever it may be. And then, of course, you can volunteer as well. You can go onto our website and apply. You will have to have rabies and tetanus inoculations, of course, and we want long-term volunteers, not short-term. You don't pay to be a volunteer, but we do expect you to do the work.
I love what you're doing, and I think there are obviously so many things we can discuss, and hopefully at some point in the future we can discuss some particular areas. But this has been a great insight into the work that you're doing. It's blown my mind in terms of some of the discussion that we've had, particularly that we just, when you think you know a lot about wildlife and you are just, it's just been a very small window of object, total tip of the iceberg.
And we feel like that all the time,
I'm
by
sure
the way.
You do.
Yes. So it's not just you.
No.
It's even us working in the field. We don't know everything, but there's so much to learn. And that's what's the fun of what we do. Yeah.
And there's so many species to deal with. I'm
Absolutely.
sure that, you're coming across new information every day as to how to do things better. But phenomenal organization. Thank you for taking the time to come and chat to me. Do encourage my listeners to look you up, support in any way that they can. Get the education part, particularly to young children. I think that's going to be the future.
Thank you for having us, and it's been fantastic talking.
Fascinating. Thanks, Wade.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode on the Pause and Effect podcast. If you found the discussion helpful, please like, share, and follow our podcast. Don't forget to leave us a comment or review. We love hearing from our listeners. Remember, you can listen to us on your preferred podcast platform. Welcome back to Just for Pets. You're with Dr. Cara.
Hi, Doc. It's Jackson the Jack Rossi here. And boy, am I itchy.
Are you on a hypoallergenic diet?
Hyper what now?
Changing to a special diet will really help. And Just for Pets have a massive range. And flea and tick medication, special shampoo.
Ooh, how quick can you get some?
Order today and we'll deliver pronto.
I feel better already.
Justforpets.co.za. Vet approved, pet adored. Get it all to your door.